My dear brothers and sisters, we are still in the period of Lent, and we are coming into the fourth week of Lent. And the fourth week of Lent has a beautiful gospel of Jesus healing the man born blind. And it's a wonderful gospel, and I hope you get a chance to read it in your preparation for this upcoming week, the fourth week of Lent. And behind me, right behind me, is a picture of Jesus healing the blind man. Now, when you read this gospel, you will notice that there are two groups involved in this gospel. There are two groups, namely the Pharisees on one hand and the blind man on the other. So let's look at these two groups. First, we look at the blind man. He was born blind, and in those days there was no cure for blindness, so therefore he was neglected and rejected. He was poor, he didn't see, he lived in darkness, and therefore he was not able to see the beauty and the light and the colors of this beautiful world. However, he was not even educated. He didn't even know the scriptures. He had to depend on second-hand knowledge and what people had to say about him and to him, and tell him and describe the world. And that's how he understood what the world looked like. And also, in his life, he didn't have knowledge of the scriptures. So he was sort of blind even in the scriptures. He had to depend on what people said and taught him. In the other group, the group of the Pharisees, we see that the Pharisees are the elite. They are educated. They are in control of society. They were the head of the country there. They were the leaders, and therefore they did not depend on anybody else. And they understood the scriptures. They taught the scriptures. They explained the scriptures, and they were well versed in the scriptures. Now, Jesus goes up to the blind man and heals him. What a beautiful gift. Jesus goes up to the blind man. The blind man didn't know who Jesus was and is. So Jesus went up to the blind man. But unfortunately, it was the Sabbath day. And Jesus healed on the Sabbath day. And when this man went to the pool of Siloam and washed his eyes and came back rejoicing, saying that he could see, the Pharisees got wind of that and questioned him. They called him in and questioned him and said, "Who is this man that has healed you? And how come he has healed you on the Sabbath day?" He says, "A man healed me. I don't know who that man is." Now you see, the faith of the Pharisees becoming darker and darker till it becomes really blind. Whereas on the other hand, the faith of the blind man is growing, and he's being led from darkness to light. So the teaching of this fourth Sunday of Lent is that we need to live as the children of light. And that is the theme of this fourth week of Lent. And as we grow into this beautiful healing of Jesus of the blind man, we see something more. The Pharisees just couldn't take this lying down, so they questioned the blind man again, the blind man who can now see. And they asked him to confess it and say, "Truly, who is this man who healed you?" That was their question. And the more they pressurized him, the more his faith grew. The more they pressurized him, the more his faith grew, and now he comes to a deeper knowledge of who Jesus is. Jesus is the prophet, and this prophet has given me sight to see and enjoy this world. And he declares it, that he has now been blind all these years, and now he can see. And therefore he experienced that this man, who is a prophet, opened his eyes before everybody there to see. This did not go down well with the Pharisees. Again, for the third and the last time, they began to question him. But before doing that, they invited his parents in. They asked his parents, "What do you say of your son?" But actually, the parents themselves were so afraid of confessing that Jesus was the Messiah. So they tried to wash their hands off that case. And they say, look, our son has grown up. He is a man now. He is a man of age. So therefore, you question him. We have no part in this. They tried to be politically correct because they were afraid of the authorities. They were afraid of confessing Jesus publicly so that they will not be condemned. Doesn't this happen with us so often? We are afraid to confess Jesus. We are afraid to identify ourselves as Christians. Maybe in the office when somebody asks us about our faith, we try to hide it. We try to cover it up. We do not confess that we are witnesses of Christ and witnesses to Christ. So the parents also did the same thing. They did not confess that Jesus is the Messiah. However, now they give this man the last chance and they call upon the glory of God and say, be truthful and say the truth. Who healed you? And then this man says, look, I was blind and now I see. And with that, the Pharisees just threw him out of the synagogue, threw him out of the assembly, threw him out of the community, threw him out of their fellowship, and that was it. He was, as it were, excommunicated. But while he was being excommunicated and thrown out of the assembly and the synagogue, Jesus meets up with him. Jesus meets up with him now face to face, and Jesus questions him and says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man says, sir, I do not know him. Who is he? And Jesus says, I am he who is talking to you. And then he falls down on his knees and says, Lord, I believe. What a beautiful confession of faith. In here, what do we learn from this beautiful story of Jesus healing the blind man? What does it have for us in this beautiful story? How can we change our lives? Lent is all about a change of life. And we see how the blind man who was born in darkness now comes to know the light. Each one of us also has to journey from darkness into light, from untruth to truth, and from death to living with Christ forever. So in this 4th week of Lent, what can you and I do to help and deepen our journey and our personal faith in Jesus? Number 1, we can realize that we live in darkness. Honestly, we live in darkness. We do not know what is right and what is wrong. We just go along with the flow. We go along with the world. And we take whatever is out there in the world and we are trying to identify with it and live it in our lives. But that is not right. That is darkness. You and I are called to live as children of the light in Jesus Christ. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And therefore we need to know that light, love that light, and follow that light. Secondly, sometimes we may consider ourselves as a nobody, or a somebody, whoever we are, nobody cares for us. But actually, Jesus cares for each one of us. Jesus comes to us like Jesus came to the man born blind. He was helpless. He had nobody around him to help him. Maybe they despised him. Maybe they forsook him. Maybe they rejected him. But Jesus goes to him and Jesus heals him straight away. He didn't have to ask Jesus to heal him, but Jesus healed him and gave him back his sight. Jesus comes to us during this period of Lent. How do you experience, how do I experience Jesus coming to us? The third thing, do I allow Jesus to open my inner eyes, like the man born blind, his real eyes were his inner eyes that were opened up. Unfortunately, the Pharisees, who had their physical eyes and could see everything, who understood everything, ultimately were the real blind people. Do I allow Jesus to open my inner eyes so that I can see the light in my life. During this Lent, let us give Jesus all that burdens us, all the darkness in our life. Maybe somewhere in some chamber of our heart, in some segment of our heart, in some part of our life, there is a lot of darkness. Give that darkness to Jesus and allow Him to convert it into light. Bring your whole self, your whole personality, your whole person into the light of Christ. Don't be afraid of it. Let Christ dispel the darkness and light up your life with the goodness that comes from Him and Him alone. And since we are coming to the end of Lent, we could also start preparing ourselves by a good self-examination of conscience and make a good confession and allow the Lord to take away everything and purify us, cleanse us, so that we may be pure for Him, that we may become more and more like Him when He rises from the dead at Easter, so that you and I can become those renewed people, the people who live in the light. That is the theme of the 4th week of Lent. So do a good preparation of your inner self, your confession, and come out into the light. Stand in the light and let the light shine in you, through you, for others. Let us then, in this 4th week of Lent, live as the children of light.